Right. So let's dive in. Here is everyone's favorite piece of software, Revit. This is a very old version of Revit because people started working on this building a long time ago. I'm also going to show you a newer version of Revit, but they kind of are the same things. I'll open that up. Here we go. I'll leave that going. What you'll notice, first of all, is that, oh, sorry, I'm not even on the screen. There we go. Here we are. We're in Revit. Just give me a wave if you've fired up Revit, if you ever used Revit before. I know some of you used it for your summer tasks. Handful of people. Give me a wave if this is like completely new to you, you've never seen it before. More people. Okay, great. What I will try and do, I'm not going to be able to teach you Revit in an hour. I will absolutely guarantee that. How long does it take to learn Revit? A long time. If you are really keen, and I would say take this with a pinch of salt because I would focus first of all on your own design project, which you know doesn't have these constraints and these pressures. If you're really keen on getting to grips with BIM and with Revit, you need to give yourself time because Revit takes a long time to learn. I'd say probably for me, I arrived to do my part 1 internship, and I'm trying to remember what year it was, but it was an earlier version of Revit. And probably after about 2 weeks, I felt like I could pretty much use the software. And after about 3 months, I felt like, okay, I'm an expert now. So it takes time. I'm never going to be able to show you in an hour enough to become an expert. But if you really want, there are lots of courses online. Lots of courses online will scam you out of lots of money and not be particularly helpful. If you want to learn Revit off YouTube, you can, but you're going to learn half good stuff and half rubbish stuff. So the only course I've ever taken, and this is what we use in our practice, this is how we train our new starters, is called BIM Pure. There are other options available, I'm sure. I'm not sponsored by this guy. But I like the way he thinks about BIM, and I like the way he thinks about Revit, and his approach usually is a really clever one. So you can do the basics Revit course, and I have a feeling, where's the thing? The pricing is much less for students, and this is what I was trying to understand. $348 a year, but somewhere there's like a student price and it's way, way, way less. 50%. Oh, it used to be like 25%. And that's when I did it. And because you were a student, you got this amazing resource that you could keep forever that was like no money at all. But now obviously they've done too well and they're charging loads of money. Okay, I do apologize. I'm sorry. Don't spend however much, $150 learning Revit. Find somewhere else. Or do a master's in it if you really want. But what you'll notice is there are a lot of similarities between Revit and Rhino in that we are building 3D geometry primarily. There's a 3D model of a building. You might recognize this building if you visited it. I wonder, this is the main entrance, right? So you come up this little thing, and then there's the rotating door, and you come in. You come into the main atrium, and then there's some stairs on your left. And in fact, what we can now do is, just like in Rhino, you'd have like a section, like a clipping plane. Well, what we've got here is a section box. It kind of does the same thing, except it's a box, which is useful. And what we'll do is actually we'll start to zoom in on the bit of the building that we care about. Here we are. So now what I've done is I've cut the building in two with this section plane. And you can see here, now we're in, this is the atrium. Here are those stairs with the big blocky bits of wood. And you go up these stairs. And then once you've gone up those stairs, not going through here, here's the wooden panels. And then you've got some classrooms on the first floor. And I can also use this to orient my view. So I'm now looking through the building. Now, it's not a particularly nice view, but you can see the geometries there. You can also see bits of the building that you'd never be able to see otherwise. So this is the roof, and there's these kind of louver panels that go around the roof plant. And you probably would never see that. But because you've got the model, or I've got the model, we can... just going to zoom in here. Here we go. We can one of the things that's going here we go, yeah. One of the things that's going on is this is a very large model, because what I said before is this isn't just about geometry. Let's click on this door here. This door is not just a set of meshes or a set of planes or a set of surfaces like it would be in Rhino, because you'd look at it in Rhino and you'd go, okay, well, there's a door, end of story. Instead, I've clicked on this door, and on the left hand side I've got a whole lot of properties about this door, like whether it has a sign on it, whether it has a closer, what type of hinge does it have, does it have an acoustic rating, does it have a particular color. Now, some of these aren't filled in. Number of leaves, as in, like, is it a double door or is it a single door? Does it have a fire override? So could you escape out of it in a fire? Is it linked to the fire system? Here we go. Is there an approach sensor? Yes, there is. Is there a lock? Yes. Is there a push plate? Yes. It needs to install a piece of metal. You know, we're into that same thing that we were in with the Villa Maria with Alvar Aalto. He was designing the door handle. Well, someone has said there should be a metal plate so you can push the door open. You have to think all the way down to that kind of scale. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, but that's not the whole of it, because actually what we have in BIM is multiple layers of where that information can be stored. So it's not quite enough just to say, here's all the information about that door. Because what happens in a building is that you end up buying 50 doors that are exactly the same. So imagine you arrive at an architecture firm and your first job, which it may well be in a couple of years' time, is to say, right, we've changed our minds about the Alvar Aalto door handles. Let's find... Oh, I've lost the thing. We've changed our minds about the Alvar Aalto door handles. We could do with going through our entire 3D model and changing every time you find one of these door handles, I want you to change it for another one. And you've got to do that 50 times. And then the next week, someone changes their mind again. This is not how you want your information to be structured, right? You don't want to have to do that every time. So instead, what we do is we head on over to, this door is probably a bad example, but we have this thing called a type of door. So now we have two layers of information. We have the information about that particular door in the building, but we also have information about all the types of that door which are repeated throughout in other places of the building. So if I copied and pasted that door somewhere else, the information about that type of door would come with it. For example, what's the kind of type information we could find? Who manufactures it? What's the model number? So if I had to order two of them, I ring up the manufacturer and say, hey, I want two of your DE397s, please. Just make this up. So if I click edit type, we're going to get a whole lot more information here. Here we've got construction type, aluminium. It's made of aluminium. This is one of the labels was aluminium. What's the material? Where's it come from? What color is it? What kind of glass is it going to be using? How big is it? What size? Is it a large, medium, small? No, exactly what all of those dimensions are for how wide each bit of the door is, how it moves around, how much it revolves. We've got an acoustic rating. So this particular door should reduce the amount of sound from the inside to the outside or the outside to the inside by 50 dB. It's made by Dormer, good name for a door company. It's called an internal. Oh, it's not an internal. It's type XC, type external C, and what that means is elsewhere we might well find. Oh, it's cost £12. That's good, isn't it? It probably doesn't cost £12, but you get the idea. Now I can do that for any element in this building model. So let's find another element. Seems to be always a door, but let's see what we can do. What have we got here? We've got a wall. We've got a handrail. Here's a handrail. With a baluster placement of 100 millimeters. So if you went now to that building and you found that handrail and you took a measuring tape, you should hopefully find that there is a 100 millimeter gap between every single one of those balusters on the railing. That's the level of detail that we're trying to get to when we model a building in a digital world. Look, there's a ladder. This is how you climb out onto the roof. That's quite cool, isn't it? This is going to be made by a company called Bilco, and it's a fixed vertical ladder type BLAWH1. So I could ring up Bilco today, and I could say, how much does your ladder cost? And I could fit that into the model, and then I could tell you exactly, I could put all of that information together. Are you getting an idea of how powerful this information world can be within the Revit environment?
Do the companies provide that 3D models?
Often they do. So often the experience of building a model in Revit is kind of like, it's like somewhere between Lego and like Rhino. So every time you have a product you're going to buy from a company, you ring them up and you say, hey, have you got a Revit model of your armchair, of your stair, of your window? And they say, oh, yeah, we'll send you a Revit model. And you literally just drag and drop it in. There it is. And you know that that's the size of the thing that you're going to provide. And so what you're doing is you're kind of already doing modular construction in some ways, aren't you? Because this item, whatever this guy is, this is a sofa. This is a Veil 03 sofa. Well, I know how big it is, and I know how big I need to make the room. And so I can start designing and making design changes in this virtual world before I even get to site. And if I can get all those things right before I get to site, I get to make the whole thing run a lot smoother, rather than like building someone's office and then realizing they can't fit the desk in. I want to show you something else that is very powerful about BIM. And so this is on the web. This is a 3D model of, like, this is just what's the name? Like a sample project. But what I can do is, this is a web-based kind of view of my building, and I can look at individual levels that I want to particularly look through. And I can zoom into particular areas that I'm maybe having a conversation with a client about. And I can also share this with a client who doesn't have Revit. And every single one of these items has the same amount of information as it does in the model. So I'm looking at some element here. I can say show properties. And here's all of the properties that we could see in the model within Revit. So we're not just putting that information in our model and then forgetting about it. We're collaborating with other people on the internet, live, all the time. However, what I will now do is I will see if I can go to... Oh, for some reason... What's that?
Was that inside?
No, that is... it's called Autodesk Construction Cloud, or it has Insight inside it, but this is Docs, which is a document management system, but it has a model viewer built in. Yeah. What I'm going to do is search for a project where I know they're using clash detection. For some reason, this has gone bad in terms of graphics. I don't know what's going on. Here we go. Right. This is online. This is a real project. This is clash detection. And again, you might think, well, this is pretty boring. But imagine for a moment that you have a structural beam or column, maybe a beam. And usually what happens is the structure of a building goes in first. So there's an order of these operations. Structure goes in first. And then the mechanical engineer or the plumbing engineer comes along and he needs to route a plumbing waste pipe from one part of the building down to another. Now, he's worked out the best way of doing that is to go dut, 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 dut. There just so happens to be a massive beam in the way. So what does the guy do on site? Drills a massive hole through the structural beam. Is the structural beam now up to snuff? No. So the whole building might collapse because we didn't coordinate between all the people working on a building. It's absolutely impossible for one person to build a building on their own. You have to collaborate with other people. And what it means is you have to start working together. And the idea behind BIM is that you start working together in the digital world so that when you get to site, you've already worked all these problems out. So let's zoom in here. This is a building that we are currently in the middle of constructing. Here we go. Let's see what we can see here. Yeah, the graphics have gone very odd. I'm going to copy this back into this browser. Here we go. Much quicker. Good. Slowly loading. This is what I spend a lot of my time looking at. I hope you're feeling excited about being an architect. For some reason, this has really stopped working very well at all. So I'm going to restart these. Here we are. So what we're looking at now is a digital model where any time two elements are occupying the same physical space, it says that there's a problem. It says there's a clash. And here we go. The very first thing says there's an access panel that clashes with a wall. So what that's saying is someone's designed there to be a door that opens in the ceiling. But they've designed that door to go through a wall. So when you arrive on site, someone's going to be like, well, you can't do that. Or they're going to build the access panel halfway into a wall and just forget about it. Or they'll build the wall and then put the access panel in and realize it doesn't fit, or whatever. And then someone's going to have a question, and you're going to have to make a design change, and then you're going to have to make sure that this isn't going to be an issue. And so what we're looking at here is an incredibly detailed view. This is actually a retrofit project, which is why it's so complicated. Let's have a look at some of the other ones. There is, one's difficult to see. Here we go. What this is saying, do you see this? This is a drain pipe, and this is a wall. Can you put a drain pipe there? No. So someone's got to move something. I mean, it's a tiny amount. It'll probably be okay. We'll probably be fine with this. But those 20 mil here and 50 mil there, they do add up sometimes. I mean, maybe that's as far to the left as it can go. And actually, I very much doubt we change where we put our wall for that. But you get the idea. And it's pretty clever being able to see. Here we go. This is a good example. There's a gas outlet and there's a wall right over the top of where the gas outlet is supposed to be. So which one's going to go where? You're going to have to move one of them. And you'll notice that this is a really good model. This has been worked on by probably 2 or 3 very talented architects, and there's still 279 things that clash into other things, which you wouldn't have worked out until you got to the construction site. So this is why we do BIM, basically, to save time, to save money, to save cost, save carbon, and to make things run smoothly. Let's head back here. I'll see whether... Yeah, I'm just going to disconnect from here. See whether this is what's wanting to play ball. Better, much better. Good. The other thing, if you have information about stuff, one of the things that you'll probably realize as you draw drawings is that your choice of colors and line weights indicate quite a lot about the thing that you're drawing. So if you draw a wall, what kind of pen do you use? Like you draw a plan. In a plan drawing, you draw a wall, what kind of pen would you use?
Sharpie.
Like a Sharpie? Yeah. Big, thick lines. Yeah? If you draw, a piece of furniture in a room, what kind of pen would you use? Like super thin, maybe like a gray thing. Now, in Rhino, when you cut through some geometry, Rhino doesn't know the difference between furniture and a wall. It just goes, it's geometry. It's just all stuff that you're cutting through. And it will produce you some lovely lines. But you won't be able to very easily, unless you use layers in a very clever way, which is what I would suggest that you always do, use layers. But you won't you won't find it very easy to have this kind of rule in your head that, whenever I draw a wall, use a big thick line. And whenever I draw a door, use a thinner pen. And whenever you draw a floor finish, use like pencil or something. Now, with Revit and with BIM, these things know what they are. And that's the big difference with building information modeling. And the reason why we don't teach you Revit in your design work for your undergraduate process is because the amount of effort that you have to go to model this thing would take you longer than the year that you've got. And also, you wouldn't see the benefit of it. But the benefit really is in construction. This is a construction coordination program. And since you're not going to construct any of your projects, what you need is a program that is much, much more flexible, allows you to change your mind about things very quickly. And that's what Rhino does. But it's good to be aware that when you get into the real world of construction, that programs like this are going to feel slow compared to the fast work of Rhino. I don't know exactly why this isn't loading, but let's try. Here we are. This looks much better than it was. For some reason, it looked like something went wrong with the graphics card. That means that what we can start to do is create. I'm going to create at this point. There's some levels in this model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a floor plan view through this model on the ground floor. Say there we go. And what that will do is it will chop the model at my ground floor level, and it will chop through all the things that I've modeled in 3D and produce a plan for me. I just clicked. This is just the default plan. Now there's a whole lot of stuff going on here that I can see. These are views that are referenced elsewhere in the model, like little sections or callouts. Now I don't really want to see all of those. So in Rhino or in CAD, what you do is you click all of these things and you just delete them, right? You're producing a 2D drawing, you're drawing the lines, you're deleting the lines, you're changing the lines. In Revit, you don't work with lines, you work with data. And this data says, well, what I'm doing is I'm looking here at an elevation circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type VG, which stands for Visibility and Graphic Overrides. I can also get to that by using this button here, Visibility and Graphics Overrides. And I'm going to come over and find my view references. I'm going to tick it off. And it hasn't quite gone away. And that's because actually, it's elevations, isn't it? Elevations. There we go. I untick elevations. And I click OK. And they all disappear. So what I've done is effectively I've used the data about what I'm looking at, and I've created this filter that says, I don't want to see that. So rather than thinking about lines, we're thinking about data. This is why we're information modeling, not geometry modeling. Yeah?
So with everyone in the firm, for people working there, they work on this one type of file at once?
Yeah, so the way it works, I won't go into too much detail because you'll learn this when you get into a firm, but you have this thing called a central model, which is one file. And then what you do is you check out a local copy of the file and you work on that for like an hour. And then you synchronize all your changes back to the central model. And as you're working, the central model is aware of who's doing what. And it will either accept your changes or it will say, oh, no, you can't do that because so-and-so is working on that wall. And in fact, actually, it does it even cleverer than that. If you click on an item that someone else is working on, it'll give you a warning and it'll be like, no, Bob's working on that. And you'll be like, oh, Bob, can you release that wall? And then Bob will go, okay, yeah, you have it. I'm done with it. And then basically you're having this kind of collaboration thing where you can't work on the same item at the same time, but you can work on the same file at the same time. And there's a lot of like, hey, can you get out of the model so that I can do this? Yeah.
Will everyone, if you work in practice in the UK, would everyone be required to work with Revit?
No.
And is it specialized people in the team?
So the biggest misconception that I tend to find in the world of BIM is that BIM equals Revit. It's a bit like Hoover.
Yeah.
You know, like the Hoover is a brand name, but everyone talks about hoovering. But actually, that's not true because Revit is by no means the only piece of software that does BIM. Also, in the US is a good example. The percentage of projects that get built in the real world that use BIM, like the BIM approach, around 50%. So by no means are you going to be forced into a world where you use this software. But it depends on what kind of practice you work for. If you work for a practice that does projects upwards of 5 million, very, very likely you're going to have to use it. And you're going to have to do this coordination with lots of people. If you work for a practice where most of your work is residential extensions under 500,000, it probably isn't worth it, because actually there's only like three or four people working on the building. You know the builder by name. You can go and visit the site and you can say, oh, I'll just move it over there. Like, you don't need this kind of really complex digital collaboration. I mean, it has value, but most people don't use it in that way. So the reason why this works to show you a really big building is because this is where it shines. This is where, if I draw a graph, I'll try drawing a graph here. Oh, I've got a spare piece of paper. Anyway, whiteboard.
So I know when I worked for a firm in Germany, they didn't use anything like Revit.
Yeah.
Even for big projects, they were just using ArchiCAD.
ArchiCAD is
BIM.
It does BIM as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But exactly the same way that when you click on something in ArchiCAD, it says this is a door. Anything that knows what it is and can tag information to that thing is building information modeling. ArchiCAD and Revit are the kind of big ones. There are others though.
How useful is Rhino in the real world now? Because when I worked, it was very much overlooked.
Yeah.
And they're like, like the practice that I worked for used Revit, and they're like, we want Revit.
Yep.
And everyone sort of in their vicinity, in terms of their sort of practice friends, used Revit.
Yeah.
And, just how useful is it?
So, I'll draw you this graph. Can I get a pen? Yes, I can get a pen. Right. Here we have like the time going along a project. And if you're familiar with the Reba work stages, you might have done this in like MPL maybe. So you've got stage 0, stage 1, all the way through to stage 6. Stage 0 is like, I'm coming up with ideas. I'm thinking with the client, we're dreaming. What could this be? How much money have you got to spend? I don't know. What site we're going to be at? I don't even know yet. Stage 1 is like, we're pretty sure we're going to do this. Let's work up a concept. Let's make sure that we know what we're doing. Maybe we have good understanding of massing and how many rooms we need in this building. Stage 2, let's get ourselves ready to really nail this down so that we can submit for planning. Stage 3, fairly detailed design. We know what the outside's going to look like. We know what the inside's going to look like. Stage 4, let's make sure that we can actually build this thing. Building regulations, make sure it's legal, make sure that everyone is collaborating. Have we got the right input from the right consultants, fire, structural, all of these kinds of things. Stage 5, we hand over to a builder, and they're going to actually go out on site and build this thing. Stage 6, we hand it over to a client. How useful is Revit at each of these stages? Stage 0, it's a hindrance. It slows you down. Let's look at this. How long does it take to make a building that has that much information in it? Months. It's really slow. It's incredibly painful to watch someone design using Revit. This is why we don't really teach you it for design. Because the other thing that Revit forces you into is it makes it really easy to build buildings that are boxes and really hard to build anything else. So if someone wants something that's a box, great tool. If you want something that's not a box, it's going to be really hard work. Stage 1, Revit's still too much. There's too much information that Revit requires in order to produce like a floor plan or a elevation or a section. And what we have is this thing of, this was really cool, right? I said, I want a floor plan of this building. And he just did it like that. And it looks pretty good. It looks okay. And you think, oh, well, wouldn't that be great if I could just have a floor plan generated in no time at all? The thing is, you take loads of time to design the model, to build the model, and then the floor plan comes really quickly. But that's really useful from basically stage 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6 onwards. Revit, BIM becomes really helpful because this speeds you up. If you imagine now, I change my mind on where this door is going to go. I click this door and I like drag it somewhere else, or I delete the door. I don't delete the door. There we go. No more door there. When I'm late in the project, it's pinned in place probably. There we go. whatever. I've done something to that door. Later in the project, maybe I've got like 400 drawings of my building. And now I need to go through every single one of those, and I need to delete the door off every single one. No one's got time for that. But at stage 4, really, really helpful, because as you're making those changes, it just updates the model and all the plans change, all the elevations change, all the sections change in one go. Really helpful. But at stage 0 and 1, it slows you down so much. There's kind of, I would make this negative, right? It slows you down so much to build the model in the first place that the gains that you get from having an instant floor plan are kind of outweighed. So what happens is a good firm should have approach, and this is how we do things at ADP. We have a strategy that says there's other softwares that are really helpful at stage 0 and stage 1. And then you move into Revit when you know it's going to be helpful to you. So you use the right tool for the right bit of the job. And this is something I say just over and over again. It's like if you're a craftsman, you're like a woodworker, you have a whole toolbox of stuff. And when you get onto a site, you go, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. I need this tool to do that job. I need that tool to do this job. If all you have is a hammer, then some things are going to be really easy, but other things are going to be really difficult. You can't saw with a hammer, you know. So we use Forma, Autodesk Forma, which is about massing, and it's not Revit. So we say to people, don't use Revit at stage 0. Don't use Revit at stage 1. We use Forma, which allows us to explore massing on a site. I'll let that load. Here we go. So, and here all I've got is like an outline of a building, and it will show me information that I think is going to be really helpful, like what's the floor area that I need to meet? What are the number of rooms I need to create? But I'm not going into any detail on that. And then when I'm happy, I can't do this here. There we go. Oh, it's locked, that's why. Create new project. Is it going to let me do this? There we go. I can send that to Revit, and then I can start building the detail in from like stage 2 onwards. Now, here's the thing. When you do a project in your student world, you pretty much get to about here by the end of the year. So how useful is Revit going to be this year to you? Not much. When you get into practice, being able to say, I can really quickly in Rhino or Maya or 3ds Max or even SketchUp, whatever it is, in another program, I like Rhino for this because it gives me this freedom. I can explore, I can change things. I don't have to worry about the data on this door handle. I can just say, there's a door there, move it around. If you know Rhino, you're helpful to projects at this stage. And what that does is it gets you in the room where you're talking with clients, you're trying things out, you're exploring options. I want to show you. This is a very long answer to the question. I'm very sorry, but you got me talking. You got me talking now.
No, it's useful.
This is why we teach. This is the thing. Like your response is the right response. Is why are you teaching me a software that I'm not going to use? And the answer is twofold. It should be useful, and if you work for a firm that can make the best use of that skill, you're going to find a good home somewhere where you're part of that collaboration. And the other thing is, if you've learned Rhino, you can learn Revit. And yeah, it's way easier to do it that way around. I'm a musician, so I started learning the violin when I was 6. And has anyone played the violin? Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because it's like the hardest instrument. There's no frets. Basically, you sound like a dead cat for like 10 years. But the cool thing is, if you've learned the violin, it's really hard and you're banging your head against the wall for like a decade. And then you get to the point where you suddenly make a nice sound. You go, oh, this is good. If you learn the violin and then you pick up a guitar, you're like, this is easy. So if you learn Rhino now, when you have the time and the patience and the space, when you get into practice and you pick up Revit, you're like, oh, this is easy. I just click there and then it makes me a wall. This is amazing. And everyone else is losing their minds because they've just used SketchUp and Revit seems far too complicated. You lift a big weight in the gym when you're training, and that means you can lift a car in the real world. Yeah.
When do you think is a good time for us to start learning Revit?
Summer between your semesters.
Like this between second and third year?
Yeah, and if I would learn it in a practice. If you learn it on its own, it's like meaningless. You're like, oh, why does this matter? But if you go and work in a practice and you say, I'm a quick learner, I'm good with software, I've been lectured by the best. You arrive in practice, you say, yeah, I don't know Revit, I've played with it a bit, I know you use Revit in your practice, give me a couple of weeks to get up to speed and we'll see where we get to. You might need to train me, but that's fine. But I'll be a better designer than anyone else that you hire. So don't get distracted by the tool. Be a good designer. And to be honest, where do architects make the most of a difference on a project? It's here. Sustainability guy, absolutely amazing sustainability guy, worked for Chipperfield, David Chipperfield's architects. He was the head of sustainability. And he said to me, you know what? When a project starts, you've got 2 weeks. 2 weeks to make a sustainability impact on that project. After that, it's gone. Everything after that is driven by cost, by practicalities, by changing weather. This is where you make the difference. And if you're in the room and you're involved there and you're doing that design in something that gives you the flexibility that someone says, hey, we've changed our mind, can you just do this? And you go, yeah, give me 2 hours, I'll get it done. You'll be way more useful than someone who says, oh yeah, let me rebuild the Revit model, I'll be 2 weeks. Right, I've gone on too long there. I was going to show you, no, not this one. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, so this is a real world project where we had a client who wanted to make the best use of their warehousing space. And so we had all of these things super, super quick. This is Rhino. This took like, what, half an hour? And I just grabbed a forklift truck from the internet and a couple of people. In fact, you'll recognize these people. This is the guy. This is the architecture guy. Yeah. And so what we did was we had them in for 2 days. This is the big client. We had them in the office for 2 days, and we worked through as many different options as we could for ways in which they could add space to their existing warehouse. But all of this is in Rhino. If I tried to do that in Revit, it would have taken me weeks. And then these images, these diagrams, come directly from Rhino as well, because we're good at rendering as well, right? And all we're doing is, it's really simple geometry. It's just like, oh, it's a metal frame and it's some walls, but suddenly it comes to life, and then we can have a conversation. The other cool thing we did with this project is we had a design session in the morning, and then we had lunch, and during lunchtime, we built their decisions into VR, and in the afternoon, they walked around their building in VR. And they were like, oh, wow, this is really big. This is too big. And we were like, oh, great. Well, we've identified that it's too big about 7 years before you would have come back and told us it was too big. So we had that conversation. Like, that's what the digital can do. It can really speed that whole process up. I've gone on too long about this. I want to show you. What was I going to show you? Line weights. Here we go. So what I want to do now is I want to put a filter on this. And let's say every piece of furniture, I'm going to override the lines and make them like a crazy magenta color and make them solid and make them like really thick. So now what I've got is, without doing any line work at all, I've just used the fact that Revit knows what furniture is as opposed to walls. And now I've got control over the line weight and the color of all the furniture. Let's do the same thing with...
Can't you do that on Rhino though? If you make 2D and then you've got everything in layers.
If you have everything in layers.
Okay.
Do you see why I tell you so many times to use layers? Because then basically you don't need Revit. You're as good as Revit in your own mind when you have a Rhino model with great layers. The reason why everyone uses this is because it allows you to collaborate in this way, and it's very, very powerful. Let's do the same with walls. Every time I see a wall line, I'm going to change the cut pattern to green. Let's see if that works. There we go. I can change all the walls to green in one go. Very last thing, we've got 5 minutes, and I want to give time for questions as well. But the next thing that's incredibly useful for this is, let's have a look at this wall. This wall here has a acoustic rating, and it also has a fire rating. Actually, this one doesn't have a fire rating, but many of the walls have fire ratings, which means that if there's a fire in one part of the building, it gives you like either 30 minutes or 60 minutes protection from the fire spreading to the next bit. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to produce a plan that shows you where all the walls are and what their fire protection ratings are. And the way you usually do that is you color in the walls different colors. Well, if you've got the data, you can say to Revit, all the walls with a fire rating of 60, color them red. All the walls with a fire rating of 30, color them blue. And then produce me a floor plan. So you're dealing in the currency of information, not the currency of line work. However, all of this stuff that I'm just describing, it works really well at like stage 3 onwards. So it's about being aware that this is coming down the track to you, but saying, if you want to get really good at this, get good at Rhino and get good at layers and organization. Because then you kind of get the same output, but you also have the flexibility. Any questions before we finish? Yeah.
Do you work out pricing for all the blocks that you put in?
Yep.
Let
me.
To, like, work out different like variations. So in firms they have like different versions of the Rhino model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like multiple models.
So within Revit, you have a thing called design options. And before I took a hacksaw to this model, there were like 3 or 4 different design options. And what that means is, hey, we're discussing with a client, what if we don't build this end of the building yet? Just get rid of it. But then it's still there, but you can keep switching between these options. Whereas in Rhino, the way you do that is you just start a new building somewhere else. And that's really helpful. But in Revit, it doesn't quite work like that. You can't just like copy and paste the building and then have a different version. You use the tool called design options. But yeah, the way this works is, if you like Excel, hands up if you like Excel. Just me. Yeah, a couple of Excel fans in. That's great. What you can do is you can say, look, I want to schedule out all of the walls and I want all of their areas. And what this will do is it will work out the square meter area of every single wall in my model. And if I know how big a brick is, I just divide that by the size of the brick, and that tells me how many bricks to order. In one go. Cool, right? Data is fun. Hopefully we haven't spent... Oh, it's so fun, Sebastian. You better believe it. All right, thanks, guys. I will see you next week, I think. Yes, I'll check Moodle. Listen out for messages.